Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel at NDN TV Nigeria. Click on the subscribe button and be the first to get notifications.
Led by Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Chief Timothy Silva, are currently meeting with state governors in the Niger Delta to seek their support in the campaign against oil theft. In two separate meetings held recently in Yenagoa and Asaba, Governor Diri of Bayelsa State and his Delta State counterpart, Senator Okowa, both demanded new approaches in dealing with the menace of oil theft, which has impacted negatively on the socio-economic well-being of oil-producing communities in the Niger Delta.
At the instance of President Muhammadu Buhari, Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Chief Timothy Silva, Chief Executive Officer of NNPC Limited, Mele Kyari, and Chief of Defense Staff, General Lucky Irabo, in April this year combed illegal crude oil refining sites across the Niger Delta. On that trip, the federal government officials carried out an on-the-spot assessment of operations of illegal crude oil refiners whose demand for stolen crude was increasing by the day. While briefing journalists, Mele Kyari said security measures had been put in place to halt theft in the oil fields of the Niger Delta.
The Navy is doing enormous work. In the last 4 to 5 days, they have made several arrests. They are blocking all the estuaries. And as long as you are not able to move the vessels around the waters, it will get out of it.
4 months after President Buhari ordered a clampdown on oil thieves and illegal refiners, not much has been done to halt their operations in the Niger Delta. Under the watch of security agencies deployed to safeguard Nigeria's oil assets in the region, oil vendors are seen to be having a field day. Appearing helpless, the federal authorities are now seeking the support of state governments who are entitled to a paltry 13% of monthly oil revenues in their fight against oil thefts. Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Chief Timothy Silva, whose administration has recorded the highest levels of oil theft in the Niger Delta, appears clueless and wants state governments to come to the rescue of the federal government.
Stealing is actually going on in the communities and in states. So we felt that we must bring everybody on board so that we are able to effectively fight this menace.
For the Chief of Defense Staff, it's been all talk and no action. During a recent visit to the Niger Delta, the 4-star general, while addressing security agencies, admitted that oil theft was on the increase as a result of compromise on their parts and promised that erring personnel will be sanctioned accordingly.
Our approach is going to be very comprehensive, and that's why we're here. And of course, I've also told members of the armed forces I'm going to be ruthless with anyone that is found to have engaged in the malfeasance. But I can assure you that at the end of it all, there will be greater improvement in the entire space.
Few months after reading the Riot Act to security personnel, General Lucky Irabo is also seeking help from state governments in the renewed onslaught against oil thieves.
No doubt the current state is so alarming, and of course if you see the figures, you know truly that the nation truly is bleeding, much more than bleeding.
With an estimated 95% of Nigeria's oil revenues appropriated by oil thieves, the federal government is faced with paucity of funds and has consistently resorted to borrowing to finance capital projects. As of June 2022, the oil-rich country was indebted to the World Bank to the tune of $13 billion. Earlier in April this year, Nigeria's total revenue stood at 1.63 trillion, with a whopping 1.94 trillion spent on debt servicing. While hosting the federal government's delegation recently in Government House Yenagoa, Senator Diri pointed out that Bayelsa State was a major casualty of Nigeria's current economic crisis resulting from unrestrained oil theft. As part of efforts to revive an ailing economy, the Bayelsa State government is currently shopping for foreign investors to create jobs and reduce poverty in the state. And as Senator Diri rightly points out, oil-producing communities in the Niger Delta are the worst victims of oil theft and illegal refining.
We're talking about our environment that has been brazenly polluted by the activities of these
particularly oil bunkers. If you go to our communities now, all you see is oil floating in our rivers. And that has led to the locals not having a source of livelihood anymore. It has led to some unknown diseases and sicknesses. And so there is a spiral effect of this oil theft that is going on in the Niger Delta.
In addition to colossal oil theft, Nigeria's current financial crisis is attributable to drastic shortfalls in its oil output. Between January and June 2022, daily oil production declined by 14.3% following sustained attacks on critical assets like the Nembe Creek trunk line and the Trans-Niger pipeline, both of which are now dormant. The highly lucrative Bonny terminal, with a capacity of producing 239,000 barrels of crude per day, is equally incapacitated and unable to produce a single barrel of oil. This ugly scenario is blamed on the federal government's ill-conceived energy security strategy in the Niger Delta. At a recent meeting with Chief Timipri Silva and other federal government officials in Government House Asaba, Governor Ifeanyi Okowa advised them to rethink their energy security strategy to allow for increased local participation in protecting Nigeria's oil assets in the Niger Delta.
It's important that as we begin to look at our surveillance and the surveillance contracts, that we probably rework the whole thing and be sure that it's driven in such a manner that there's a strong commitment and there is a community involvement.
While the Nigerian economy continues to bleed on account of massive oil theft, oil-producing communities in the Niger Delta, groaning under the negative externalities of illegal crude oil refining, are in double jeopardy, a situation that leaves them as a worse victim of Nigeria's oil costs. Obviously, the onus is on the federal government to demonstrate the political will needed to put a final stop to oil thefts in the Niger Delta.
Inside the Niger Delta,